Well, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viaud. Thank you for joining us for another exciting program. Tonight's show will be a little different than usual. We will be answering a mailbag question and giving you the latest COS news from a new host of COS Now. However, the majority of our show will be a discussion with incredible legislative champions of Convention of States. For anyone that is new to the show and organization, I'd like to welcome you to Convention of States. We are a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to call a convention proposing amendments to the Constitution that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution, and to date, we have 19 states that have done so thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really glad to have you. Now, to get things started, we're going to go ahead and show you the latest news of what's going on across the country regarding Convention of States. And we're going to hear tonight from the new host of COS Now, Rachel Martin.
This week on COS Now, Mark Meckler responds to a New York Times hit piece against Convention of States, several legislatures consider COS's legislation to reign in D.C., and Mark Levin gives us a shout-out. All that and more on COS Now.
What do we want?
Happy New Year, everyone! I'm your host, Rachel Martin, and this is COS Now, where we keep you up to date on all the latest news regarding the Convention of States movement. Before we get into today's topics, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss any upcoming content that we have for you guys. Over the holidays, COS President Mark Meckler made several media appearances, including taking to the airwaves to push back against a New York Times article spreading disinformation about the Article 5 process. Here's what that sounded like.
In the New York Times, here's the headline: A constitutional convention? ? Some Democrats fear it is coming. Mark, do you get a sense there is maybe the momentum may be growing more than it ever has in the past when it comes to the idea of a Convention of States?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can definitely tell when you see the New York Times lashing out like this, and we see this all over the country now, but when it hits the New York Times, you know that people are taking it seriously. And I think it's correct. The left or the far left should be afraid of this.
2025 is off to a roaring start with several state legislatures, like Wyoming, Montana, and New Jersey, already moving to consider Convention of States Action's Article 5 legislation. And with a dozen more states expected to follow in the coming weeks, here's Mark Meckler on NTD News with more.
And so if we want to make those things permanent, if we want to do things like do away with the Department of Education or Energy or Health and Human Services, return those powers to the states. If we really do want to get term limits, I don't believe we're going to get those things from Washington, D.C. or a balanced budget amendment. It's going to take the American people stepping up and do that. We have a huge number of people going into the administration that are in support of this. J.D. Vance, Mike Huckabee, a mutual friend of ours, is a good friend of Convention of States, as is Pete Hegseth. Brooke Rollins going to Ag. Even Caroline Leavitt, the new press secretary, is a supporter of Convention of States. So I expect that we're going to see in the next few years a Convention of States get called, and we're going to impose restrictions on the federal government from outside.
Rallies are happening across the country to urge legislators to support this effort. Locals are encouraged to join COS Colorado in its Capitol Day in Denver on January 9th at 8 a.m. Over in Montana, COS co-founder Michael Ferris will lead a rally at the state capitol on January 13th at 9:30 a.m. And later that same day, COS President Mark Meckler will meet with citizens in Lincoln, Nebraska at 6 p.m. Eastern. Are you frustrated by the chaos in Congress over the budget? You're not alone. COS endorser and Texas Congressman Chip Roy took to the House floor to deliver a powerful message.
When I got through cancer about 12 years ago, I made my promise to my kids that I would do everything I can to save this country. And what we're doing right now is to continue to double down on the things that are destroying the republic. We are going to increase the debt ceiling, not just $4 trillion, that's false. We have spent $4.7 trillion in additional debt in the last 19 months. We're going to increase the debt by $5 trillion. That's what's going to happen right here by Republicans, increasing the debt $5 trillion. And what are you doing in the same bill? $110 billion unpaid for, because you never have any ounce of self-respect to go out and campaign saying you're going to balance the budget, and then you come in here and pass $110 billion unpaid for.
Likewise, Convention of States endorser Mark Levin used his radio program to challenge Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk to explore the solutions outlined in the Liberty Amendments, the best-selling book that helped launch the COS movement.
Liberty Amendments was a book I wrote. I wrote that book to promote the Convention of States. Simultaneous, and unbeknownst to either of us, with Mark Meckler. His group have gone a long way in getting a number of state legislatures to pass resolutions in favor of a convention of states. Because what he knows and what I know is that Washington won't fix itself. I would encourage Musk and I would encourage Vivek to take a look at them. Because this isn't about one administration. This isn't about one 4-year period where they win the next crowd wins and then blows up everything.
And that's all I have for today's recap. If you'd like to know how to get involved with Convention of States, comment down below and be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. I'll see you guys same time next week here on COS Now.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. Really exciting things going on across the country. And I want to highlight that tomorrow there's going to be a Capitol Day in Colorado. You heard it there. I believe they said it was 8 a.m. Local time. So be sure to check that out. If you're in Colorado, be there at the Capitol with the team. That I know they are ready to go. A lot of other Capitol days that are going on. And we're going to be joined here in a minute by a couple of amazing patriots. I do want to mention Mississippi. Anyone in Mississippi, their Capitol Day is going to be on Tuesday, January 28th. So be on the lookout for emails for that. And for Oklahoma on February 11th, they're going to be having their Capitol Day, and they're going to be joined by Mark Meckler for that one. So if you're in Oklahoma and you're in Mississippi, Wisconsin, any state across the country, make sure that you have signed the petition and you are opted into emails to get information about these important Capitol Days. And without further ado, we have the great pleasure of welcoming to the program 3 sensational patriots from state legislatures where we have passed the COS resolution. Joining us tonight are Representatives Mark LePack of Oklahoma, Dan Eubanks of Mississippi, and Dan Knodel of Wisconsin. Gentlemen, Happy New Year and welcome to COS at Home.
Happy New Year, Jonathan.
Good evening. Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much. And as I mentioned, it is an honor to speak with the three of you this evening. And we want to give each of you as much time as we can to answer a few different questions. First and foremost, however, I'd like for each of you to tell us your COS story. When did you first learn about the Article 5 movement or the COS resolution in general? And why did you decide to spend political capital not only supporting, but championing our legislation? Representative LePack, since Oklahoma was state number 7, I want to start with you, and then we will go to Representative Eubanks from Mississippi, which was state 15, and then Representative Knodel of Wisconsin, which was state number 16. So Representative LePack, over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. My story is pretty simple. You referred to Mark Levin. I read his book about the time it came out, and then my wife was a delegate to the 2012 National Convention, Republican National Convention, and that we lost. And I was pretty upset about it. A couple years later, the House seat came open here, and I had decided to run because of Article 5. And my thought was, if we're going to have to get something done in Oklahoma related to this, I got down to and by the way, I ran unopposed. I never said a word about it from a campaign perspective. I figured I'd have to talk to people, educate them, explain why I was running, et cetera, as opposed to the usual, I'm conservative, Second Amendment, pro-life, all that kind of stuff. Get down to the Capitol, and I'm delighted to find out we're already working on it, although we had 2 factions fighting each other, both within the Republican Party, actually 3. One was more in favor of like a balanced budget amendment, one Convention of States project, and then one that was against all of it. The Democrats sat back, sold popcorn, and watched the fight. The House generally favored the balanced budget approach. The Senate generally favored the Convention of States approach. They passed in their respective chambers and failed in the opposite chambers. And so that was my first year. I was pretty frustrated. Second year, we finally decided to get along and put both resolutions together and then passed it. Still a debate on the floor, a narrow passage, but I've been really thrilled with our progress. We got it done. I personally favor the Convention of States approach for all the reasons stated in the Levin book, and got to do both simulated conventions. Really enjoyed that. I think, and we got some challenges right now, but I think I'll let somebody else talk for a second. That's my story.
Thank you, sir. And I agree with you. I had the privilege of reading Mark Levin's book, and that's what got me involved into the Article 5 movement. And from there, found out about Convention of States and got involved. So, folks, if you haven't read the Liberty Amendments, I highly recommend it. Representative Eubanks, how did you first hear about Article 5 and COS?
Well, I had a little bit of a similar experience in that I was a part of a group called the Conservative Coalition that had formed up here in Mississippi. And there were some members of that group in the chapter I was a part of that were pro COS. That was where I first heard about the COS movement. And I too read Levin's book and was like, this all makes sense. You know, this is a solution here. And when I got elected, I was off to the races from day one and sponsored resolution and the first year I think I had a couple co-sponsors with me that I was able to get. And it was really a testament to the COS family in Mississippi, that all the grassroots workers, I could not have done what I did if it hadn't been for each one of them. So we got a little ways down. Nobody really looked at it the first year. The second year, I had increased about 20 sponsors, and part of that was due in part to most of it was due in part to the grassroots COS fighters that were starting to take and text and call their legislator. The next year, I had over 50. And at that point, the speaker had to take a look at it because he was saying, well, if you can get more than 50 people, we'll take a look at it. And I held him to it. And we actually got it brought up on the floor. And I think that debate went for a couple hours. It was long. We passed the House, and then it died in the Senate. And then the next year we came back and we were able to get it through. And it was just something that I truly believe it's a solution for what ails us, because, you know, we can't expect the people in Congress to limit themselves because they haven't. And so this is going to be an action where the people, the citizenry, the patriots of this country are going to have to get involved. And this is through the brilliant thinking and divine inspiration of our founding fathers. I believe that this was the solution that they put in. It was the fail-safe, the Hail Mary, so to speak. And so that was kind of it for me. I came in already gung-ho, and it took us 4 years to get there. But through the help of our grassroots support, through the COS Mark and all you guys, Jonathan, all the support network were able to help me and a couple other legislators get it across the finish line. And now we're just trying to get the resolution through that aids in the determining of delegates when that time comes.
Well said, and amazing. I love to hear that for both of you, you had the opportunity to read Levin's book before you were a legislator, and then came in ready to go and doing everything that you can to champion our resolution. That is absolutely wonderful. Representative Knodel, how about you?
Well, I came in totally unaware of Article 5, and I'm no constitutional scholar for sure. That's 16 years ago when I entered the state assembly in Wisconsin. Just recently have done a short stint in the state senate, and now back to the House or state assembly. So it really was the grassroots folks that came in Wisconsin and introduced me to this. I had already been discovering and was aghast of how much authority that the legislature had ceded over to the governor in our case in Wisconsin. And I feel that was legislators that were afraid or didn't have the spine to make tough decisions. So they're happy to allow that authority to flow to the governor's office. And then we see the same thing on the national level, where so many things now are dictated by the federal government, and often the strings attached with it being money. And I couldn't understand, or again, wouldn't believe why we would not be exercising this authority that we have in the U.S. Constitution as state legislators. So this is something, it's much harder to claw back authority once you have given it up, but this is the avenue to do just that. And so became all in. Mark Meckler had been out to Wisconsin early in that period of time, and also had a U.S. Term Limits group had been appearing in Wisconsin. So we actually ended up doing two. We did a balanced budget, and then we did the Convention of States with the three sections in it. So we have two of those applications in on Congress, and we need to get this going.
Amen. So Representative Knoll, I'm going to come back to you for this next question. And obviously we were able to pass in all three of your states. And as I was thinking about it, we passed in Oklahoma in 2016, Mississippi 2019, and in Wisconsin 2022. And as I mentioned earlier, and you saw on the screen there, we're talking about states 7, 15, and 16. But I think that goes to show folks at home that this is something that it's not something that unfortunately we can't snap our fingers and get it done right away. There's a legislative process that we have to go through. There's work that has to be done. There are various different factions that need to be brought together. You've mentioned, I think all of you have mentioned the other Article 5 movements that are out there. So Representative Knoll, if you could narrow things down perhaps to one thing, or perhaps the most important thing that led to our resolution getting passed in Wisconsin, what would that be?
It would be getting my fellow legislators to understand that we have this authority, that we have this option, and that we should exercise it. And then to convince them that the fear factor enters in your opposition groups, of course, coming in with their runaway conventions tactics. And so you have to, again, convince those legislators that we really hold the authority. Whatever amendment would come out of a convention, it's up to us. The ratification is everything, and we hold that power. And I don't know if they, and in many states who have not seen this through, they're perhaps have some fear factor of grabbing the reins and simply exercising the authority that exists. We take that oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution. We just did it 2 days ago in Wisconsin. And so it's really, I think, bolstering up those legislators to say, this is something that we have the authority to do. It's the states that came together to create the United States. And this is our way to keep our hand in the operations of the federal government.
Yeah, I think educating legislators is a critical aspect to what we do with Convention of States. And, Article 5, as you mentioned, Representative Knodel, it was not something you were aware of when you were elected. And I think there are many legislators that don't realize that they have this power. And so it's so important that we get that message across to them. Representative Eubanks, how about you? Was there one important thing that you could boil things down to that helped us get across the finish line in Mississippi?
Well, he's absolutely right about just the educating legislators. That was both times I got up and debated this from the well. They brought out the whole runaway convention, and so I would say if you're sponsoring this in your state assembly, make yourself aware that is not a fear that they need to have, and you can educate them on why that's the case. But I would say what was for me, I probably think was the most important aspect was the grassroots folks. Every year, folks would get more emails, more contact from their constituents, and when it got down to it, and I had over 50 co-sponsors, it was due largely in part to the interaction between their constituents, and it was we were going into an election year. And I was able to tell everybody in caucus meeting, look, those And one of the things that our grassroots guys did, it was really neat. They printed off the names of and phone numbers and all that of all the people that were supporters in their district. And then I had them put on every member's desk. And I was able to say to them, look, you're going to be knocking on these doors in a couple months, and they're going to ask you why you didn't do anything. And the time is now. And they knew that these folks weren't just your average constituency. They're people that are engaged. They're people that were actually holding their elected leadership accountable. And so they were the last people they wanted to come knock on their door and get grilled. And so I really think it was just by the grassroots making their leadership know that they were there and they were watching, and then just hammer it home that you're going to go face them now when you're going to try to run for reelection. And I think that was the sauce that got it over the finish line and was able to even get it through committee and onto the floor, and even the Wilder support, because we all know that the primary motivation to pretty much every politician is fear and greed. Fear they're going to lose power, and greed for more of it. And when they start realizing it's something that their constituency wants, they act in accordance with that.
Amen. Yeah, and great points. And I mean, that just goes to show you the power of the grassroots. And so, folks, if you're out there and you haven't gotten involved, or you haven't even signed the petition, I encourage you, go to conventionofstates.com, sign that petition, and then go to conventionofstates.com/act and consider becoming a volunteer and showing up. We will provide you with training. We'll give you the tools necessary to succeed. But you want to be a part of this. You want to make your voice heard on this issue, and that is how we're ultimately going to get some more of these states to sign on and get us to 34 states. So thank you, Representative Eubanks and Representative LePac. How about you? What if you could boil it down to one thing? And you hail from the land of the late great Dr. Tom Coburn. And before we got started here, you had mentioned there was a story you wanted to share about that. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about that story?
Oh, well, that was just after the simulated convention, and I was going to go out to dinner with him, and ended up in, I think, the kitchen with Mark and Rita and a number of folks, and they were debriefing on the whole convention and eating the leftovers from lunch that day that they'd served. And I kept thinking we're getting ready to leave, and ended up there about three hours getting grilled about what I think and what would be better and how to work. And I kept looking at Coburn, and he kept not leaving. But Dr. Tom Coburn was our secret weapon. A lot of people think he left the Senate because he was sick. He did have several bouts with cancer in his lifetime, which eventually claimed his life. He told me privately the reason he left was to work on this project. And so he had come to Oklahoma City, and we had a couple of different events pulling together as many folks as would be willing to come talk. And he worked through the reasons we needed to pass this. Now, he was obviously for the COS project. And like I said, we had put our proposals together. And incidentally, this last year passed a term limits thing. So we've got really 3 different applications in. But he was able to articulate the fears people had about this. Now, I don't think the folks that were for one or the other of the 2 projects was really fearful of it, but I think his presence helped us come together to get it done. I don't know that anybody that was against it changed their minds in terms of the Republican caucus, but I think his activity was key. Ironically, the only person that ever came to see me about it was somebody opposed to it. It was my very second day in the legislature in session, and they showed up and wanted to explain to me how this was such a bad idea, which made me laugh because I had the Liberty Amendment sitting right behind me on the credenza. But I think today, and one of you mentioned the grassroots, Dan, right? So that's so important, but in a state that has already passed it, it is still important to continue to contact your legislators about this. The way this thing works, you fill out the thing and we get an email saying, hey, I just signed on to the project. I respond to every one of them, and in that ask them to talk to their friends, to talk to their neighbors, to talk to people around the state. My biggest concern is that I'm entering my last term. We have 12-year term limits. I'm the last of 4 people who was here in the House of Representatives when this all passed. So it becomes a matter of educating the ones that were more concerned with budget failures and all that kind of stuff, and never went through the wars and the arguments. Now, Mark and team have come out. Senator Rob Standers had him out 2 or 3 times in the last few years. You mentioned he's coming back to Oklahoma. So this will be an education opportunity for my fellow legislators. But I need to pass the torch to somebody on my side of the building, and we've got a couple of good ones over in the Senate that are stepping up. So that grassroots effort, even if you've passed it, is so important.
That's very well said, Representative LePack. And, one of the things that the past states now have to deal with is there's still a lot of opposition out there to our resolution. And although we like to think that we got it done, and in Oklahoma's case, we removed the sunset clause and we're good, there are going to be, and we have seen in many different states, rescission efforts where organizations and opposition will get to some legislators that have concerns about this and will file legislation to rescind our application as well as other Article 5 applications. And we need to have our grassroots army there ready to respond to that. So vitally important, even if you are in a past state, make sure that you are signing that petition and you're getting involved to help us protect what we've already gained in these states. And there's also a way for you to help advance the ball, right? So in state like Mississippi, where Representative Eubanks mentioned before, we're trying to pass legislation where we identify how a commissioner is going to be selected, how they're going to conduct themselves at a convention, and if there are any penalties that will go along with any commissioner that goes rogue or attempts to go rogue at the convention, what those kind of criminal penalties they may be dealing with. So lots of important things that can be getting done in states that have already passed the resolution. Now, Representative LePack, you also mentioned the simulated convention, and I know all 3 of you gentlemen were at the 2023 simulated convention. I think you may have also been at the 2016 simulated convention held by Convention of States Foundation. So, Representative Eubanks, I want to start with you. Could you share with us what that experience was like? Obviously, you've been in favor of Article 5 and helped us get our resolution passed there, but actually participating in a simulated convention, what was that like, and what did you learn during that experience?
Well, I thought it was amazing because it was kind of like doing a beta test of what the process would look like. And the first time we went, that I went back in 2016, it was an amazing experience. And then when I went back in 2023, I was the chairman of the Term Limits Committee, and just working through the process. If there's ever any doubt, we went and did in, I don't know, less than 48 hours, what would normally take, who knows, a month, several weeks when we get to an actual convention, and it didn't go off the rails. It was like a brain trust. You had people that were operating as fail safes when somebody would go off the rails and say, well, what about this? And it's, well, that's not the original call, or there's, like the Bible says, there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. And it was a beautiful experience because you had so many different legislators and people that knew their stuff come together and offer up amendments, and then work those amendments on the floor as if we were actually doing the real thing. And the whole thing worked. And if we could cram that into less than 48 hours, if there weren't any time limits on that, we could solve some problems in this country. And that's what I thought was beautiful about it, was seeing it actually work and play out and not go off the rails, and just, watch the amendment process, watch the committee process, and just see how it works. And if anything, I think if somebody's a doubter, they should probably go and take a look, because I know you have that footage, I believe, or parts of it up on the website, and I think it would allay some fears.
Yes, we absolutely do have that available. And Producer G, perhaps you can throw that up on the screen as to where people could go to watch the simulated convention. We have all of that information. We also have the proposals that came out from the simulated convention, all available on our website. There you go. You can go to conventionofstates.com/sim to check that out. And Representative Eubanks, I spoke with the secretary of your committee from the 2023 simulation, and he says you did an excellent job. So well done, sir. Representative LePac, how about you, sir? What was the experience like for you?
Well, let me go back to the first one. For me, it was very, very enlightening, but impressive in that, first of all, we were getting feedback that people thought this was a real convention. I don't know if that's true or not, but we were hearing that. You had serious people in the room conducting themselves like you would expect statesmen to conduct themselves, but also debating issues. And I keep mentioning party, but the delegation next to us, I think they were from Missouri, had a Democrat or two in the room as their delegation. And so you had both sides, if you will, the political aisle present. I want to say we had everybody, almost every state represented, if I remember right. But I will tell you a little bit of a different story. We showed some self-discipline. One of the amendments that came out of committee was mine. And we were debating this thing, and then it started getting amended. And pretty soon, things were starting to go off the rails, in my opinion, as to what we should do with that. So I was getting ready to table my own amendment so that we could move on when somebody else rescued me and did it for me. But I thought that was significant because it showed we weren't just going to do something to produce something. When it started to not be what we should have been there to do, it got tabled. And I thought that was an important little feature. But we produced pretty good work for a condensed schedule like we did. I think I should say when one actually happens, it might be a little bit different in terms of the mechanics of how it gets done. But I think from a demonstration perspective, it was serious work by serious people, and I thought went off really well. And then we repeated that with the last one in 23. Maybe a little bit different flavor, but a lot of us had been to the first one, so the action was a little bit different. But both were really good experiences as a legislator.
Absolutely. And, I think what you touched on there at the end is something that I took away, having been at the 2023 simulated convention, was just how serious all of the commissioners that were there took the responsibility of being a commissioner, even though it was a simulation and, you were there and you could relax. We were in beautiful Colonial Williamsburg. Everyone took the job seriously, and it was incredible to see the way things worked throughout the time that we spent there. Representative Knodel, how about you? What was your experience like at the simulated convention?
I was not at 2016 at the 23 simulation. It was excellent. There's no question the committee work was pretty intense with the limited time frame that we had there in committee before we got to the floor. But it was very reassuring. There was mentioned earlier, statesmanship, discipline was certainly there from those that would be commissioners, or what we would expect of our state commissioners to be present. So I thought it went well. And we brought forward more amendments than we might even experience, that I would expect to come out in a convention if we truly keep it to 3 items or less. So it was great, and as I would hoped that it would come off. So I think it's something that again, we need those states that are not on board yet to understand that this is a serious matter when they send people to a convention. They're commissioners, that they have guardrails in place for these commissioners, or they can recall them, or whatever it takes to keep them focused and disciplined and measured in what is happening there. And then truly you're going to get an excellent product on the floor for final votes that could come forward or come then back to the states to be ratified.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times people look at the convention and they think to themselves, it's going to run away, or we're going to get these amendments right out of it. And I think it's important to recognize, and you mentioned this, that this is just a process by which we get these commissioners together, which many of them will be state legislators, and just have a conversation about proposals that will then go back to the states, right? It's not something where we're rewriting the Constitution, or after it's passed at a convention, it's added to the Constitution. It ultimately goes back to the states for further deliberation, for further discussion, and it takes 38 states in order for a proposal out of a convention to be added and ratified to the Constitution. So there is a long process, and I personally believe it is a safe process because we have such a high threshold before something gets added to the Constitution. Okay, Representative Pack, I'm going to come back to you. We are at 19 states that have passed the COS resolution. I mentioned this earlier. And we've kind of been stuck at that number since 2022. There have been a number of people that have expressed a great deal of frustration and feeling like this is never going to get done because we've been kind of stuck in neutral right now. Do you have any advice for our grassroots activists, or perhaps even legislators in states that have not yet passed our resolution? And if you do have that advice, would you mind sharing it with us?
There's no silver bullet, but I'll say what I said to folks here locally when the 2012 presidential election went the way it went, which is, you got a couple of choices here, but the best one's to grit your teeth and get back to work. Don't quit doing the pick and shovel work that you have to do to get something difficult done. It takes a lot of faith and a lot of diligence and effort. But it also takes understanding how to deal with the fears people express. And I call it fear. I think the opposition to this is really about fear. How many times have we heard the phrase "be not afraid," in our various churches, but in reading scriptures? But that really is what it is all about. The logic for that starts with, hey, the Constitution that we all love really came about because of an illegal, unauthorized convention. The logic starts to get really twisted. But you can get so bogged down on trying to debate the history of this that you forget about the tool that's available to you that was provided by these people that we all revere. And they disagreed among themselves as well. But thankfully, they put this safety valve in place. And it's there for us to use. And we shouldn't be afraid to use it. Personally, when I read the Liberty Amendments, that's really kind of, I already knew some of this, but it really kind of articulated things in a way that woke you up about the problem in DC in a great way. And so my advice is keep working. Don't lose faith. This is going to take some time. In my case, I was pleasantly surprised because people are already working on it. And maybe that's the message. I have no idea how long they were working on it before I got there in 2000, late 14, early 15. So that's my advice. Don't stop working.
Thank you, sir. And you mentioned the fear, and that is a major obstacle and something that we have to deal with, and we need to attack it head on and address that fear and just continue to educate people on the process and show them that even though it has not been done before, it's not something that we need to fear. Representative Knodel, how about you? Do you have any advice for our grassroots activists or legislators in states that haven't passed the resolution?
You've got to have that champion. You have to identify that champion in each chamber to get started, and they're going to be the one to rally the troops with the grassroots behind them, which is just crucial. There was even a point in time where we had getting close to the right numbers, and the grassroots got a little too aggressive, and we're starting to bother a few legislators. So I actually had to call them off a bit and give the legislators a little space so they can get through this and figure it out. Which ended up working well, but I couldn't got it done without having that grassroots behind me. So in our particular case, even the speaker wasn't 100% on board. And our understanding and the way we work in Wisconsin, well, if an individual legislator can go out there and get the numbers before we even bring this thing forward in a co-sponsorship method, that he'll entertain it. That is what happened when you can get, in our case, 30 plus co-sponsors to get on board with the bill. But before it even comes out, or when it initially comes out, they're already on board, is very important to the speaker and leadership. So it was helpful to just look to DC, to look at the incompetence and the failure to govern in DC, and all the more reason why we as state legislators need to engage and claw back or take advantage of this authority that we have. And Congress, to this point in DC, hasn't improved much, if at all, at least in a decade. And perhaps things will change now, come later this month. But that was easy to point to DC and say we as state legislatures really need to drive what the governance of the country. And so that I found used as a very effective tool to bring my other colleagues on board. And in the end, when we were on the floor, the speaker, who was opposed to the term limits portion specifically, spoke on the floor and referenced that. However, yet he voted with us and for it, even stating his opposition for that one portion, and referenced that this all would have to go through convention and the process that before it could come back to the legislatures and be ratified. I just to this day don't think my fellow colleagues realize the opportunity that is there for us and the authority that we have, and even in killing something if it does come back for ratification. If it's bad, we'll take care of that, and it's not going to happen. So it's just a matter of lining those things up, but certainly starting with the champion in each house, in each state.
A lot of great points in that answer, sir, and thank you so much. And I think one important point is that we do have very passionate grassroots activists, but sometimes cooler heads prevail. And so I think we need to be careful to check our passion at the door when it comes to the legislative process. But I'm glad that was able to work out in Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, you have to read the room when you walk into a legislator's office as well, and kind of figure out the temperature of each individual legislator, which is no easy task.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely. Representative Eubanks, how about you, sir? Any advice for our grassroots or legislators in non-pass states?
Absolutely. Government can move painfully slow. And, when I first got elected, I thought, I'm going to change the world, and you get your first set of bills and then you're met with the fact that a chairman doesn't want to bring it up or whatever the case is. And I think that I would just say to all of your grassroots folks, and even those legislators that have been working for years to try to get movement and something passed, is just don't lose heart. As painful as it is that government moves slow, sometimes that can also be a blessing, because if the process was really easy, we'd have horrible stuff enacted and passed. And so that's part of that's the check and balance. But the reality is that if it's the right thing to do, it will always be the right thing to do. I think it was William Wilberforce, 30 years trying to get rid of slavery. I think I would have lost heart after 20 years, 10 years probably. But but there is hope if you stay the course and you stand up and you continue to fight, and don't count on DC to do anything. It's just because the Republicans are in charge, everything's going to get great. Just because Trump got elected, everything's going to get great. It doesn't work that way. The reality is that you had Chip Roy, a clip from him early on in this broadcast. He took all kinds of heat from Republicans for standing up and fighting for something that was valuable. And the fact that if we continue on this current pace, we're going to be run off a fiscal cliff, and then everybody is going to be in a world of hurt. There's a lot at stake, and that means that's the motivation. You keep fighting the fight, even when you get down, even when you suffer defeat, and you encourage each other on and spur each other on to good works, and keep on fighting, because discouragement is the way the devil gets people taken out of the game. Well, it's also the way politics can get people taken out of the game. So I would just say, don't lose heart. That is it. Keep fighting the good fight. Encourage your champions. I know that was just mentioned a minute ago. Find a champion. The champions are getting beat up. Encourage them too, because they get really discouraged as well, and they can lose heart. But that's it. That'd be my advice. Just keep on fighting the good fight. Don't lose heart. Everything good never came easy. And so as long as we stay the course, it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so well said. And it reminds me of a story Mark Meckler shares with us often, the story of John Quincy Adams and how he became the hellhound of abolition. And, he was asked why he was working so hard to work to get the abolition of slavery, even becoming unpopular amongst his colleagues. And he replied and he said, "Duty is ours, results are God's," right? So we have the duty to make sure that we remain in the fight. And the one part of your question or your answer there, Representative Eubanks, is actually what I want to focus the final question on for you gentlemen. And I'll start with you, Representative Knodel. With the election of President Donald Trump, it is inevitable that we will hear exactly what Representative Eubanks was talking about, where supporters and legislators are going to come to us and say, look, everything is fine now. We do not need to have an Article 5 convention. The swamp draining is about to commence. How would you respond to that line of thinking, Representative Knodel?
Well, there'd be no more reason that it's more important that we continue this battle and have the states be recognized. We must be recognized each individually and as that group that has to ratify amendments in any way, shape, or form when they come forward. So they're going to have plenty on their plate. Success is a different story, but we need to focus on states' rights. And that's what we must keep reminding our congressional delegates about states' rights. It's all about states' rights, because they will forget that quickly if they're working on all these other matters as well. And I wish them the best, and I expect that we'll have significant successes in Congress and with President Trump. But I don't know that states' rights will come to the top of their deliberations with all the other matters that they have to address. So it's on us to continue to keep states' rights at the forefront.
That's an excellent point. And I think with the 17th Amendment and making the direct election of United States senators going to popular vote and taking that away from the state legislators, it goes to show you that there really isn't a lot of representation for the states. And even though we may see that kind of changing a little bit and hopefully positive things coming out of DC, it comes down to the states to make sure that they are exercising their sovereignty within our system of government. So I think that's a great point. Representative LePack, how would you respond to that line of thinking?
I think we overestimate how much can get done, how quickly. And, these elections are a matter of choices that we have before us. None of these candidates are perfect. They've all got things you agree with or disagree with. I'm optimistic that we'll see some progress on some big things. But I think to the earlier point, this is when you double down from a state perspective. How interesting do you think things would get if we went from 19 states to 30, to 32, to 34, 33, and you got that close? What do you think would change in D.C.? Tom Coburn, in response to the runaway convention argument, would say, "Well, the runaway is in D.C. right now." And it was kind of a joke, get a little chuckle, but when you really think about it, that's what's going on. The status quo isn't going to go away easily. And if you listen to folks talking post-election and analyzing what's happened in the country, it's real clear very few people have changed their view if they're in opposition to the group that won, the Trump team, and the two houses of Congress, chambers of Congress. So I think it's a long, slow fight, even if you agreed with everything that was going to happen. And so I don't think as a state you can relax. I think you have to continue to push the issue, because even if the Trump agenda and you checked them all off, immigration, the law and order stuff, taxes, less regulation, you got rid of some of the issues with how money's being spent. We already have a little bit of a disagreement in-house on the debt limit, the debt ceiling, right? Is that a good way to make your point and force change, or do you flex a little bit and take a longer view? They're not going to agree on that. It'll be a fight, and so we just need to keep working. I keep saying that, but it's like having multiple torpedoes in the water. Don't just wait for the first one to hit and hope you didn't miss. You need to have multiple things going on at the same time to achieve the end you want to achieve.
Well said, sir. And you're absolutely right. It does take time for things to happen. And I think Representative Knodel mentioned that Congress hasn't really changed much over the last number of years, and certainly hasn't improved. So, in order for us to get a number of things done that President Trump wants to see accomplished, you're going to need the recalcitrant Congress to go along with it, because things that are done by executive order, as we have seen, can be undone by executive order through the next administration. So it is going to take some time to get these things done. And it's going to be a major challenge for the Trump administration. Representative Eubanks, you kind of commented on this a little bit, but I will give you the final word. How would you respond to the line of thinking that President Trump's been elected, nothing to worry about now?
Well, and that's one of the things I think we as citizens want somebody that's going to go just fight for us, so we don't have to worry about it. And the sad reality is it doesn't work that way, because once you get your fighter in, you've got to support your fighter. And I think our potential under the Trump administration and the new landscape is great, but we should never kid ourselves into believing that the debts and a lot of the erosion of certain freedoms and liberties didn't also come under Republican majorities. And so we've got to stay diligent. We've got to stay plugged in, and we got to stay fighting and standing up and holding accountable, because accountability really is the antiseptic for the infection of the swamp. And just like at the state level, which is a government that is closer to its citizenry, just like your local level is even closer, the federal government needs to know people are watching. They need to know that people care, and they need to hear from you. And we need to support the fighters, and then we need to fight against the ones that aren't going the right direction. And so I would say, don't throw in the towel and think that Trump's going to save the day, or whichever legislator or congressman or lady is going to somehow solve all the problems. They need you engaged. They need state legislatures engaged, and they need us all to be a part of the process, because without the accountability, nothing's going to change.
Absolutely. And the first three words to the United States Constitution is "we the people," right? So we need to be engaged, no matter who is in charge, to make sure that we are ensuring that our country becomes a self-governing nation once again. Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time this evening, for all of your service to your states and to the COS movement. You know, many of our opponents, and I'm sure you've heard this before, will say that we cannot have an Article 5 convention because we no longer have leaders that are the caliber of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and James Madison and so on. Well, I believe that the three of you are living proof that such a claim is both false and absurd. We are blessed to have patriots like you serving us and in the fight. So thank you so very much for everything that you do, and God bless you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Let's make the states relevant again.
Yes.
Amen. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Just incredible conversation there. And we are blessed. We really are blessed to have some patriots like those legislators. And there are many others out there in the country, many others within the COS movement. And so if you are in a state where you have not passed the resolution, I assure you there are James Madisons and George Washingtons and Ben Franklins among you within your legislature. You just need to find them and work with them to get this passed. And it can be done. And those gentlemen are living proof of that. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to action at home. Okay, so tonight for Action at Home, we are going to walk you through how to share the COS petition with your friends and family on Facebook and also other social media accounts. Producer G is going to navigate us through how to do this, so feel free to follow along on your computer. You can go to conventionofstates.com/petition, and that will bring up the petition there. If you haven't signed it, you're going to want to go ahead and do that. And then continue on down at the bottom of the screen, and there you see we have a couple of different buttons where you can share the petition directly to your social media accounts. So you can click on any one of those buttons. We'll go with the Facebook share or the X share, and that will bring it up on X or Facebook. We're going back and forth here. Sorry, Producer G. And there you have it, right? It brings you right to your account. And you can go ahead and type in anything that you want to encourage people to share it. I think if you're not logged in when you click on the button, you'll be prompted to log into your account. So if you've got one for Facebook or X, or I'm looking there, it looks like Instagram, and I think another one there is email there at the bottom of the screen. You can click on those buttons and then type in some additional information about why it's so important. And then click on that share button, and it will go ahead and share it. And you can choose your audience and various different things already there within Facebook or X or LinkedIn. So that is a simple thing that you can do right from the comfort of your own home, but make a major impact on Convention of States. You heard from those three legislators how important it is to have numbers, right? Not just people that are involved, but people that sign that petition, let legislators know that they are in favor of an Article 5 convention under the Convention of States resolution. And that's information that they then take and they share with their colleagues, or legislators appreciate the information and knowing that they're out there. And some of them, like Representative LePac, will write directly back to you and share it with you. So again, go to conventionofstates.com/petition, sign the petition if you haven't done so already, or you can go ahead and click on the button there at the bottom of the screen in order to share it. And one other thing I want to mention while we're in Action at Home, and I meant to mention this at the conclusion of COS Now, during our last COS at Home for 2024, we mentioned during this segment the open letter to President Trump, and we were talking about him with the legislators. We are in the process of trying to get a letter to President Trump letting him know about the support that we have for Convention of States, and we want him to know about it so he can get behind it and urge that states support our resolution. If you haven't done so already, you can go to conventionofstates.com/Trump to sign your name to it. And I wanted to give you an update. We are at over 30,000 signatures on this open letter already. We want to get to 1 million. So you have the opportunity to go ahead and add your name to that. And then please share it with friends and family. Let's get people to sign this letter so we can get it before President Trump. And hopefully his support will help us get across the finish line in many of the states where we haven't passed already. Now, let's go ahead and check the Minutemen mailbag. All right. So tonight we're going to once again answer two different questions from Patriots that submitted questions in our audience. The first question comes from Elliot Lehem, who asks, will the fair tax be discussed and hopefully passed at a convention? Well, thank you so much for that question, Elliot. The fair tax and consumption taxes, flat taxes, etc., are all germane to our resolution and may be brought up and discussed at a convention. In fact, in 2016, the Convention of States Foundation Simulated Convention, the one that Representative LePac and Representative Eubanks were at, passed a proposed amendment that repealed the 16th Amendment of the Constitution, which established the federal income tax. So that is absolutely something that falls within the scope of our convention. And I'd go further in saying that if you or anyone else who is watching us tonight wants to see the fair tax passed, the best avenue to accomplish that is through an Article 5 convention, especially a convention that is convened under the COS subject matter. So if you want to see that fair tax brought up and discussed and potentially passed, you want to make sure that you are supporting the Convention of States resolution and seeing an Article 5 convention convened. The next question comes from Scott Woodstock, who writes in, when do we as people insist on Convention of States? The needing permission dealio isn't working out. Well, Scott, I would argue that we have insisted on a Convention of States in 19 states already, and we are insisting on it across the country. This is a grassroots movement, and you heard Representative Knodel talking about how passionate our grassroots activists are. And if you've been around them, you know they're not big on asking, "Mother, may I?" So it's not about asking permission. We are insisting on it. Now, with that said, as you heard from all three of those gentlemen, we can't force legislators to pass our resolution, right? It is something, there is a legislative process that we have to navigate, we have to go through, and sometimes it can take a while, right? So Convention of States got started in 2013, and I forget exactly when Senator Coburn came on. I want to say it was 2014, 2015. And we didn't pass in Oklahoma until 2016. And as Representative LePac mentioned, he came into the legislature in 2014 and they were already working on it, right? And it takes time. We were able to pass in 2016, then Mississippi in 2019, and then Wisconsin in 2022. But it takes time for you to go through the process. So it's not an overnight thing, but we can work at it. But make no mistake, Scott, our activists are not asking permission for a convention. They are insisting on it. Or as our friend and soon-to-be Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, once commented to me, Article 5 is the American Revolution without the bullets. So we are fighting to restore a self-governing culture through this movement, which comes by reaching, teaching, and activating grassroots activists and developing relationships with legislators like the gentleman that we heard from earlier this evening in order to see our resolution passed and that convention called. So thank you, Scott, and thank you, Elliot, for some great questions this evening. And if you would like to submit a question to a future program, you can go ahead and go to conventionofstates.com/mailbag and drop one in there. We appreciate all of you in our audience so very much, and we would love to have you as a part of the program. So thank you for doing that. Okay, folks, we've gone a little over here tonight. Forgive me for that, but we wanted to make sure that we gave plenty of time to Representative LePac, Eubanks, and Knodel here tonight. But just a reminder, all of the COS at home shows are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month. So that's at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We have it. Obviously, this is not the first Wednesday of the month, but last week was New Year's Day. So we wanted to allow everyone to enjoy the time with their families. But our next show is going to be back on schedule on Wednesday, February 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And we are excited to be joined by another great friend of the Convention of States movement, a returning guest, Blaze TV and radio host, Steve Deace. I mean, this is going to be a great conversation. Steve was at, that picture there is from our leadership summit that we held in 2022 here in Orlando, Florida. And all of the conversations that I've had with Steve over the years have been incredibly insightful and motivating. So you're not going to want to miss this episode of Convention of COS at Home. So join us again, Wednesday, February 5th at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's been a lot of fun to be here with you and having these great conversations and talking more about Article 5. I hope that you've enjoyed the program and that it will help you, particularly if you're in a state where you have not passed the resolution. Hearing from these legislators, I hope that inspired you. And if you're in a state that's already passed, maybe one of those, you also heard why it's important to stay involved. So I hope that you enjoyed the program. I want to give another thank you to our guests tonight, Representatives LePac, Eubanks, and Knodel, for taking the time out of their busy schedules. Legislative session is getting started. We appreciate them joining us tonight. As always, a huge thank you to the legendary producer G for all of his work in organizing things behind the scenes. Really appreciate him. But of course, the greatest thanks of all goes to you in our audience for your continued support of Convention of States and the Article 5 movement. It's important to remember that no matter what, despite all of the problems our country currently faces, and no matter how excited we are at the potential of what could be coming out of a President Donald Trump administration, at the end of the day, what our country needs is you and me. We, the people, we are the solution. We're the ones that are going to ensure that our country returns to a culture of self-governance. So thank you again for being here, for being a supporter, for being in the fight. We greatly appreciate you. Happy New Year once again. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless you.